The Flyers have their new head coach. It took a little bit, but it probably came down to the worst kept secret in the world, and that the Flyers hire Rick Tocchet as the next head coach in franchise history. And I definitely have a lot of opinions about Rick Tocchet as a head coach, and it's not a lot of good opinions because to me, am I saying this hire is the worst hire in the world and the Flyers are a dumpster fire organization that they should be sent to the sun and all of that stuff, fire Danny Briere, Keith Jones immediately and all that crap? No, I'm not saying that. I can say that the hire is pretty much meh. I mean, it's a safe hire, I guess you can say. I'm not overly thrilled by the hire. I just don't think that for a team that wants to take that next step in a rebuild, that you go with safe hire. Why don't you take a risk with a head coach? Why don't you try to go for someone young and fresh that can maybe bring life into an organization, that can, maybe change some things, that maybe you see a potential in a very young head coach or something like that, and not just go for your typical NHL retread. That's what Rick Tocchet is. He is your typical NHL retread of a head coach. And it's not like that he is a retread of an NHL head coach that has been very successful in the National Hockey League. He's coached for 9 years as a head coach, specifically. He's also had some years as an assistant head coach with the Pittsburgh Penguins when they did win their back-to-back Stanley Cups, so he has that on his resume. But I'm specifically looking at him as an NHL head coach. And he has coached 9 seasons in the National Hockey League. And Rick Tocchet has only made the playoffs twice. He's only made the playoffs twice. He's coached for 3 organizations. He coached for the Tampa Bay Lightning, a year where they eventually drafted first overall and got Steven Stamkos. And granted, Steve Yzerman, the GM at the time, probably regrets not giving Tocchet a longer leash. He didn't get a very long leash with the Tampa Bay Lightning, so I really won't put that too much badly on his resume. His first real true gig was after becoming, being an assistant with the Pittsburgh Penguins, winning back-to-back Stanley Cups. He became the head coach of the Arizona Coyotes to man the rebuild and progress that team, develop that team, a lot of young draft picks, a lot of young prospects and everything like that, to mend that team through a rebuild, progress that team through a rebuild, and develop a lot of their players. That didn't go well. That didn't go well at all. The only reason he made the playoffs with the Arizona Coyotes is because of a pandemic. Is because of the COVID pandemic. When a bunch of the teams got into the bubble, they played in a play-in tournament, and they beat the Nashville Predators on the back of Darcy Kemper, and they lost in the first round of the playoffs that year because Arizona just wasn't that good of a team. Now, was that all Rick Tocchet's fault? No. But it's also a head coach that you're being hired to progress a team through a rebuild and develop players. That should go to the responsibility of the head coach. And a lot of players in Arizona stagnated. A lot of players in Arizona didn't really live up to their potential and all that stuff. And a lot of that goes to the development process with the head coach. And it didn't work with Rick Tocchet in Arizona. He coached the final year after the bubble playoff season. He got fired after 2020-21. Then he went to TV for a little bit and didn't coach for a little bit. He went to TNT, was a part of that analyst crew. And then eventually, through the entire crazy process, after the Vancouver Canucks brought in Bruce Boudreau, they go through this whole thing, basically making him a lame duck in the entire process because it was clearly obvious that Vancouver wanted to go out and hire Rick Tocchet. So they just kept Bruce Boudreau on the hot seat for so long and just let him wallow there. And he knew he was getting fired, and you see him crying on the bench when Vancouver gives him a standing ovation and all that crap. And then eventually the next day he gets fired, and Rick Tocchet is immediately brought in to be the savior of that franchise. And yes, Vancouver, the very next season, he wins a Jack Adams Award. They're one of the better teams in the National Hockey League. He makes the playoffs. They lose in round 2. But I will also throw out to that because Vancouver, if you look at their statistics, they had a very ungodly shooting percentage and they had elite goaltending. Look what happened with Vancouver this past season. The ungodly shooting percentage became way down and their elite goaltending got injured. And they came way back down to earth. And oh yeah, the whole drama between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson happened, and Rick Tocchet was in the middle of that entire thing, and he did nothing to resolve that. He did nothing to make that, that was the entire distraction for the Vancouver Canucks. He did nothing to fix that. And clearly, it felt like Rick Tocchet didn't even want to be there anymore, because he kind of leaked halfway through the season that he didn't want to be in Vancouver anymore. And then also Jim Rutherford, at their end of season press conference, talking about the possibility of keeping Rick Tocchet, made it sound like that Rick Tocchet already had his mind elsewhere throughout the season, that he didn't want to be in Vancouver anymore. He wanted to be somewhere else. Is that the guy that you want as a head coach? Is that the guy that you want as a head coach? I'm just being honest. And people will throw back to, oh, look at the organizations that he's coached for, the Arizona Coyotes and the Vancouver Canucks. I don't care what teams he's coached for. He was brought into Arizona to bring that team through a rebuild and develop all their players. That did not happen. And look at where Arizona has been ever since. Yes, Arizona was a poorly ran organization, and now they're in Utah, hopefully in a better ran ownership. Still, Rick Tocchet was supposed to be responsible for bringing that team into an upper echelon to develop all their prospects and make them a better team that could compete for a Stanley Cup, and that never happened. Yes, he won a Jack Adams with the Vancouver Canucks on top of a team on an ungodly shooting percentage and very elite goaltending. That came back down to earth, and they were a mediocre product. A Jack Adams award, yes, it's a very nice accomplishment for a head coach in the National Hockey League. It can mean jack shit as well, because you can win a Jack Adams award and then get fired the next season, because that's the lifespan of an NHL head coach. It just is. Does it really mark winning a Jack Adams make you a good head coach? No, it does not, because there are many good head coaches in this league that never win Jack Adams. I could go to the best head coach in the National Hockey League, and John Cooper, in my personal opinion. Has he been nominated for Jack Adams Award? Yes. Has he won a Jack Adams Award? No. No, he has not. There are many coaches in this league that are good coaches that have never won the Jack Adams Award. A Jack Adams Award doesn't define you being a good head coach. They had a good season off of ungodly shooting percentages and elite goaltending. Now, am I trying to take away any positives from Rick Tocchet from that season? No. No. It was an outlier of a pretty mediocre head coaching career. That's basically it. Because once all that went awry, the very next season, in this past season with Vancouver, it went back to mediocrity. And that is the one thing I'm afraid for with this Flyers organization, is more mediocrity. Hockey purgatory. Let's just go through this entire coaching record for Rick Tocchet. 9 seasons in the NHL. He's coached in as a head coach, he's coached in 638 games. He has a 286 and 265, and he has a 286, 265, and 87 record. 286 wins, 265 losses, and 87 overtime losses. He has a winning percentage of .516, and he's only made the playoffs twice in his head coaching career. His first season with the Arizona Coyotes, 29, 41, and 12. His second season, okay, they saw improvement, 39, 35, and 8. Then the next season was the COVID-shortened season that got stopped 70 games into the season, 33, 29, and 8, and they were ranked 5th in their division, and they made the playoffs because of the play-in, of the bubble. The very next season, the 2021 season, 56 games coached, below 500, 24, 26, and 6, 54 points. His first season in Vancouver, when he was brought in after Bruce Boudreau, he coached in 36 games. Okay, he gave them to a 20, 12, and 4 record in Vancouver. Then the next season, coached 82 games, 50 wins, 23 losses, 9 overtime losses, 109 points, finished first in the Pacific Division. They went to the second round, Game 7. It was a good playoff run, solid playoff run there. His first solid playoff run is an entire coaching career. And then the very next season, last season with Vancouver, 82 games coached, 38, 30, and 14, finished 5th in the Pacific Division. Does that scream good head coach to you? Does that scream elite head coach? Does that scream head coach that, yeah, I wanna fight through these next few seasons with Rick Tocchet as the head coach? Is Rick Tocchet the guy that's going to bring the Flyers to the promised land and compete for Stanley Cups down the road and eventually win a Stanley Cup? Does that sound like Rick Tocchet to you? Personally, does that sound like Rick Tocchet to you? Because all Rick Tocchet sounds like is just another retread NHL head coach that probably will get fired 3-4 years down the line, because that's what retread NHL coaches do. They come in, they spread their message dies after 3-4 years, they get fired. Unless it's very successful. And yes, I understand the Flyers have to make moves. I understand this Flyers offseason, it's not going to be the same team this upcoming season as it was last season. I understand they got a lot of draft picks in this draft. I understand Danny Briere and Keith Jones have a lot of moves to make in this offseason and then following offseason as well. It's going to be a completely looking different team possibly. Does that give me hope? I would have to see how the roster is constructed. I would have to see how they play on the ice. I'm not saying Rick Tocchet is the worst fucking hire in the world. I'm just afraid of, once again, this team being stuck in hockey purgatory. And this has nothing to do with Rick Tocchet being a former Flyer. I can care less that Rick Tocchet is a former Flyer. And then people like to go out, oh, Jesus Christ, why do you hate former Flyers so much? Don't you know the last few hires the Flyers have made have not been former Flyers and all that crap? Yeah, because the Flyers were ran by Dave Scott and everything like that, and they still had former Flyers in the advisory staff roles that were probably making those decisions on Dave Scott's behalf. You know, Paul Holmgren, Bobby Clark, and all that stuff, Bill Barber. Those guys were probably making the decisions over Dave Scott. Let's be real and honest here. You know, bringing in Chuck Fletcher, maybe bringing in Alain Vigneault. Hextall was pretty much a disaster, bringing in Dave Haxtell and all that crap. What else? Bringing in John Tortorella, that definitely was an ownership type of move and an alumni type of move more than anything else than a Chuck Fletcher or anything like that. Yeah, I understand the previous couple of hires weren't former Flyers, but there were former Flyers that were above in the ranks that were probably still making hockey decisions that they probably shouldn't be anymore because those guys are dinosaurs and fossils and they should go off into the sunset and stay away from hockey decisions. Now we're going back to this former Flyer crap all the time. And like I said, I don't care that Danny Briere, Keith Jones, Rick Tocchet, I don't care that they're former Flyers. All I care about is, do you have a successful resume in the National Hockey League? And Rick Tocchet, from when I look at his resume, it's a very mediocre resume. It's mediocre. It's mediocre. It's hockey purgatory. And there's also things that I do criticize about Rick Tocchet that some people don't bring up, is that the year when he came into Vancouver, with the whole drama with Bruce Boudreau and all that stuff, Elias Pettersson had a 100-plus point season. He comes in there, instantly criticizes Elias Pettersson after having a fantastic season. What happens? He changes the dynamic of Elias Pettersson's game, and he's not an 100-point player anymore. Why'd you do that? Because you brought in a style that doesn't fit with your best player on your team. And a lot of people like to point that out with Matvei Michkov, because I'm not an expertise on coaching styles. I'm not an expertise on playing styles, on what they do on the ice, and all those dynamics, right? I'm just a guy that watches. I'm just a guy that observes. But I can be critical. And I can listen to experts that I see on social media. I can watch experts on YouTube, people that really dive into all those statistics, that dive into all the play styles that a hockey team could do, a play style that a head coach could bring, and all that stuff. A lot of those people say that his coaching style might not benefit Matvei Michkov. And don't you want to hire a guy that's going to bring the most out of Matvei Michkov? Just being honest. And also this hire kind of counteracts what Danny Briere said in his offseason press conference after the season ended, that he wants to bring in a head coach that's going to bring offense and more offensive production to this team. That's not a Rick Tocchet team. Because if you go through his entire coaching career over his 9-year career, besides last year, all of his teams are bottom 10 in scoring. Yeah, they might have good power plays, and you might actually see a good Flyers power play for once. Does that take a knock to the 5-on-5 scoring? Does that take a knock to anywhere else? What assistants are going to be involved? Is Brad Shaw still going to be the assistant head coach? Is he still going to be involved with this team? I have no idea. All I am is judging right now with fear, because I don't see a future that Rick Tocchet is your head coach for more than 3-4 seasons, because he can easily get canned, because that's what a retread NHL head coach does unless he finds major success. Now, does that mean after the first year, if the Flyers don't have success under Rick Tocchet, do I put all the blame on Rick Tocchet? No. I'm not doing that whatsoever. I just hate that people go out there and say that you can't judge this move because you don't know anything that goes on behind the scenes, that goes on in interviews and all that stuff. No, I can judge it. I can judge it because I look at a very large sample size of 9 seasons as an NHL head coach, and all I see is mediocrity. All I see is mediocrity and one outlier season where he won a Jack Adams. It's an outlier on top of a huge heaping pile of mediocrity. And where has this Flyers team been for the past decade plus? Maybe besides the past few years where, no, actually not the past few years, a few outlier years where they finished tops in the NHL draft lottery. Where have the Flyers been? Hockey purgatory. Mediocrity. Not good enough to be a Stanley Cup contender, not good enough to make the playoffs, or you're just slightly good enough to make it as a wild card team on the very last few days, and you're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. You're not bad enough to get a high draft pick. That's what hockey purgatory is. And the Flyers have been in hockey purgatory more times than not. And that's what I fear with Rick Tocchet becoming your head coach. Is just more of the same of the past decade of Flyers hockey. Purgatory. Mediocrity. Now, I understand that moves do have to be made. I understand that. Moves have to be made. This is a big offseason for Danny Briere and Keith Jones. Same thing with next offseason. You have 7 picks in the first 2 rounds of the NHL draft. Do I expect the Flyers to make all of those picks? No. No, I do not. And also, a lot of people like to point out with Rick Tocchet that a lot of players like him. A lot of players love playing for him. Quinn Hughes in Vancouver, he loved him. Does that mean Quinn Hughes and the Flyers are going to trade for Quinn Hughes and all that stuff? I highly fucking doubt it. Because I would assume Quinn Hughes probably wants to play with his brothers in New Jersey more than he wants to come play for Rick Tocchet. Just being honest there. Oh, people like to point out Sidney Crosby loves playing for Rick Tocchet. Rick Tocchet was his assistant coach, not his head coach in Pittsburgh. Now, did that take any value away from Sidney Crosby like playing for Rick Tocchet? No. Does that mean anything? No. It doesn't mean anything to me. Because what does that have to do with, what does Sidney Crosby have to do with liking Rick Tocchet? Now, if Rick Tocchet means that a lot of players in the NHL like him, does that make the Flyers an attractive destination again? I have no fucking clue. That's up to Danny Briere and Keith Jones to make those decisions. Can you attract players to your destination? Can you attract players to your city? And is the head coach going to be the big selling point? Rick Tocchet. Is Rick Tocchet going to be the big selling point? To bringing in free agents. Is he really the big selling point? Because I feel like you should have a good team rather than a head coach being your selling point. That's just my personal opinion. Why does the head coach have to be your selling point? Don't you want a good team? And I understand you got to make moves. To make a good team, you got to make trades. You got to make signings. You got to make good draft picks. You got to develop players. There's a lot of things that go into making a good hockey team. But why does your selling point have to be a head coach? Why does that have to be the selling point? And it sounds like, I think Anthony Sanfilippo posted this, the full totality of the signing totals, I believe so. I think it was Anthony Sanfilippo. I think he said 5 years, $25 million for Rick Tocchet, if I am not mistaken. Yep. Rick Tocchet will be the next host of the Philadelphia Flyers. This was posted an hour ago. Sounds like the deal is in the range of the 5 years, $25 million total. Man. Just don't like it. Don't like it. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I'm sorry. Not that I think it's the worst hire in the world. It's not the worst hire in the world. It's a safe hire. It's not savvy. I would have very much been in favor of giving Pat Ferschweiler, the head coach of Western Michigan University, the job. I would have taken the risk with the college head coach. And before people go out, oh my God, look at what happened with Dave Hackstall and all that crap. You really want to go the college route again? Dave Hackstall, completely different from Pat Ferschweiler. There's a tweet out there. I forget who specifically tweeted it out. But if you look at the 4 seasons before Ferschweiler was brought into Western Michigan University, and then the 4 years after he was brought in, it is night and day on how much he transformed that organization from basically an irrelevant college team, Division I hockey team that was, like I said, irrelevant, to being a national champion, to being one of the best teams in the NCAA, being one of the best teams in Division I hockey, winning a national title this year, beating Dave Carl and Denver University, going out and beating Boston College, all those teams, to win a national title. Also, it's probably good with some of the Flyers prospects in their system, help develop Alex Bump into a pretty intriguing prospect. I would take a risk with a head coach like that. I would take a risk. Look at how much he transformed that organization in Western Michigan. Why wouldn't you want to take that risk in the NHL? Now, maybe Furschweiler didn't want to come back to the NHL for maybe something that's more guaranteed in college. Because, as people say, if you're a head coach in the National Hockey League, you're getting hired to only get fired down the road. College coaches, your jobs are way more secure. Way more secure. Same thing with juniors. Same thing with basically everything else. That's not the NHL. Maybe even the AHL. Your job security is way more secure in these lower leagues. And you could make good money on that. Dave Carl just got a huge extension from Denver University to stay their head coach. I wouldn't be shocked if Western Michigan University gives Furschweiler all the money in the world to stay there. And I wouldn't be shocked if he stays there either, but I really would have risked bringing him on as a head coach. The Flyers had an interview with him. It was a couple of weeks ago. I believe Kevin Weeks posted that out. He had a 2+ hour long interview with the Flyers. I think he would have been a better hire personally. I would have loved. It was a risk I was willing to take. It's a risk I was willing to take. Rick Tocchet, just meh. Just meh. Now I could 100% be proven wrong with this entire thing. The moves that Danny Briere and Keith Jones go out there and do, they put a better roster out there, and that team succeeds under Rick Tocchet for years and years and years to come. Matvei Michkov becomes this, even though he was always going to be this fantastic player, and granted, there's a lot of fucking shit going on with Matvei Michkov right now on a vacation to Dubai, him being extorted for all this goddamn money, getting in a car accident and all that crap. Thank God he's okay. But Jesus Christ, get that guy out of fucking Dubai, please. Jesus, hell. My God, there's a whole freaking international articles coming out of all that stuff with Michkov. Jesus fucking Christ. Have him stay home, go down to the fucking Jersey Shore. Go down to Wildwood, go down to Ocean City, AC if you like to gamble and all that crap. Or even go to a nice calm place like Sea Isle. Just don't go international at that point. Jesus fucking Christ. Like it was that news on top of all this crap with Rick Tocchet. It's funny too because a couple of days ago, Elliot Friedman made it sound like that Rick Tocchet might not have been possibly going for the Flyers for the head coaching position, that he might have been considering TV more, that he had other suitors. He had Boston, he had Pittsburgh. I think Darren Dreger put out that Seattle was maybe an option out there for Rick Tocchet, even though that probably really wasn't the case. It was more Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Boston, just because of those connections there. Philadelphia, obviously, because it's still more local for him. His family, I believe, lives in Pittsburgh. That's a big reason why he would go and coach for Pittsburgh, especially with Sidney Crosby liking him. Boston's also a very attractive organization for an NHL head coach. That's very obvious there. But I think Darren Dreger then basically debunked that Elliot Friedman post from the previous day and saying that it's probably more likely that Rick Tocchet's most likely going to become the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, because that was their main priority, was hiring Rick Tocchet. He was the top of their list, top of their lists. Personally, if I look at the Flyers lists of, well, even though I don't know what their list was, if I think of what their list is, Rick Tocchet obviously was their number one option. Maybe Brad Shaw was their second option. Maybe Pat Furschweiler was their third option. I doubt LaPerriere was even a consideration there. I believe there was a guy in the OHL that used to play for Danny Briere with the Buffalo Sabres. I forget his name out there. I believe his last name's McKee or something like that. He was an option maybe, but that was more, I guess, just with the connection with Briere and all that crap. But it was most likely going to be Tocchet, Bradshaw, as, just a stopgap head coach, and Furschweiler. That's probably were the three options. And it probably was the worst kept secret with Rick Tocchet. That's basically what it was. I don't agree with it, man. I just don't agree with it. And we also do got an article right here that Anthony Sanfilippo just posted for on Pattison. He had a story ready to go as Rick Tocchet, the Flyers hire Rick Tocchet as their new head coach. So let's read this article. Then we get to the Anytime Hotline because we do have one voicemail there. And let's read this article from Anthony Sanfilippo on Pattison. In a major franchise move, the Philadelphia Flyers have hired Rick Tocchet as their next head coach, signing the former star to a multi-year contract. The Flyer sources tell on Pattison and Philly Daily that the team the team is bringing in 61-year-old Flyers Hall of Famer back to Philadelphia to take over behind the bench. While the numbers on the deal are not official yet, one Flyers source said it is in the range of 5 years, $25 million. Tocchet's return to the Flyers marks a homecoming for one of the city's most beloved hockey figures and signals a new direction and the next step forward for rebuilding the franchise. Tocchet is sure to be a polarizing choice for the Flyers. Older fans who remember the days of the organization will certainly, the good days of the organization, basically. Basically, the old school Flyers fans, this is what he's summarizing here, will love the choice because of how good the teams were when Rick Tocchet was a player. However, younger fans will almost certainly hate this hiring because it is a sign of the Flyers not getting with the times and going with another retread older head coach. It should be pointed out that neither narrative is a good one. Tocchet is older, but he has shown the ability to relate to young players. Vancouver star defenseman Quinn Hughes had a very close relationship with Tocchet and always spoke highly of him as a coach and as a teacher. He's an amazing coach, Hughes said. Look at me individually in my game. He's been amazing for me. Amazing for a lot of guys. He's just a great person, first of all. That's a guy you want to compete for, you want to play for, and he's a terrific head coach. And there's a reason Vancouver wanted him to come back. There's a reason other teams like Boston, Seattle, and Pittsburgh were interested in hiring him. He does have a certain, connection with the players. Anthony Sanfilippo always likes to use these fancy words that I don't know how to pronounce, so I'm just gonna try to summarize that as best as I can. However, Tocchet does preach a style of play that does seem to be a bit more old school, and it's fair to wonder how it will work to unleash the young talent. Many believe former coach John Tortorella limited Matvei Michkov, but Matvei Michkov did exceed his Las Vegas set point total by double digits under Tortorella. So if he was held back by his former coach, there should be even more production there. Will Tocchet be able to get that out of him with the style of play he preaches, which is designed for teams to be defensive first and be opportunistic offensively? Is he willing to adapt to the players he has? Only time will tell. A homecoming for a Flyers legend. Tocchet is deeply woven in the Flyers' history. He played two-stepper stints in the Orange and Black, 1984-92 and 2000-2002, and was a fan favorite known for his tough-as-nails, hard-nosed style during his 18-year NHL playing career. Tocchet spent over half of it with Philadelphia, tallying in 232 goals, tied for 10th in franchise history, and 508 points in 621 games for the Flyers. He remains the club's all-time leader in penalty minutes, a testament to the gritty physical identity he embodied on the ice. Tocchet was a key part of two Flyers teams that reached the Stanley Cup final in 85 and 87, including the inspired 87 playoff run, which he notched 11 goals and 21 points before the Flyers fell in 7 games to Edmonton. For his contributions, Tocchet was inducted into the Flyers Hall of Fame in 2021, cementing his status as a franchise legend. Those Philadelphia ties run as deeply, as emotionally as they do statistically. That connection hasn't faded with time. Now, after building his coaching resume around the league, Tocchet returns to the Flyers with the task of instilling that familiar Flyers ethos in a new era. Tocchet's coaching track record, highs and lows. Tocchet's most recent coaching stops was with the Vancouver Canucks, where he spent the last 2 seasons. He initially took over in January of 23 and quickly left his mark. In his first full season in Vancouver, 23-24, he guided an unexpected turnaround, leading the Canucks to a Pacific Division title and a run to the second round of the playoffs, the team's deepest playoff run in over a decade. That campaign earned Tocchet the Jack Adams Award as the NHL Coach of the Year in 2024, a prestigious honor that underscored the success of his methods. Players responded to his coaching, and a once floundering Canucks squad appeared to be on the rise. However, the following up year brought adversity. Vancouver's 24-25 season went off the rails, marred by a bitter rift in the locker room between stars J.T. Miller and Elias Pettersson that had the roots before Tocchet ever arrived in Vancouver. That said, as much of a player's coach Tocchet is, he really wasn't able to rectify it, and the Canucks were forced to trade JT Miller. The internal discord and the string of injuries derailed the team's performance. Pettersson, a franchise cornerstone, had the worst statistical season of his career amid the turmoil. Despite Tocchet's effort to steady the ship, the Canucks missed the playoffs, and the organization and coach mutually parted ways at season's end. Although the Canucks were willing to potentially keep Tocchet for a third year before deciding not to do so, after it became apparent that Tocchet wanted to coach elsewhere. Vancouver's front office praised Tocchet's work ethic and the respect he commanded in the room, but that sharp step backward forced a difficult decision. By April, reports surfaced that Tocchet would not return, making him a free agent at the helm of the NHL bench. Even with a disappointing final season in Vancouver, Tocchet emerged from his tenure there with his coaching reputation arguably at his peak. He became one of the most sought-after names in the 2025 coaching market, reportedly drawing interest from multiple teams, including Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Boston, the moment he became available. Rather than rush into the job, Tocchet took a measured approach, interviewing teams as much as they interviewed him. The Flyers ultimately emerged as the winner of that sweepstakes, offering the long-term stability and vision Tocchet was seeking. The 5-year contract indicates that the Flyers are confident, the confidence in Philadelphia has in his leadership, and it gave Tocchet the kind of commitment he valued in choosing his next destination. Tocchet's coaching journey has been one of perseverance and growth. Prior to Vancouver, blah, blah, blah. It's going over the rest of his coaching resume, blah, 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 blah. Pittsburgh, Arizona. Why did the Flyers choose Tocchet? Blah, 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 blah. There's such a very long article. Holy fucking shit. Let's see. Yeah, it's basically just more on Tocchet, so I'm not going to fully go over that crap. Let's see. What else is there? I don't think there really is much. Like I said, let's see. So it looks like Tocchet's assistant coach in Vancouver became the head coach of Vancouver. I wonder. So Adam Foote is the new head coach of the Vancouver Canucks, and that was Rick Tocchet's defensive coach. I wonder if that means Brad Shaw is going to stay. So that's something right there. So yeah, that's basically all I got to give for you guys here. So we got a voicemail and anytime hotline. We'll get to that, and then we'll end off this video because I went longer than I wanted to, but I had to get the frustrations out. So let's get to Sean. He's going to share his words, and then we'll close it out here.
You know, reading the various opinions on Twitter about Tocchet, there's really no middle ground that I see. Some fans either really like the hire or some fans loathe it. There's no in between. I'll just say devil's advocate, I guess. I mean, my thing is we have to trust Briere and Jones. Maybe it wouldn't have been my pick. Maybe he doesn't have the best of track records, but it's official, or so it seems, so I got to get on board with it. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Rick Tocchet as a player for the Flyers. He was a hell of a player for the Flyers, but coaching, you know, that remains to be seen. But again, you know, Briere, Jones, they're smarter about the game than I'll ever be. So I never bury a guy without giving him a shot. At this point, that's what we're left with.
I mean, his coaching record throughout his entire career basically states that he's just a guy. He's just a mediocre head coach. If his name wasn't Rick Tocchet and it was somebody else, John Doe, if his name was just John Doe, would he be as sought after as he was if his name wasn't Rick Tocchet? That's also something that I think about. Is it just the name value that makes him such an attractive head coach for some reason? I don't know. Now, all this said, I will give Rick Tocchet a chance. I want him to prove me wrong. I really do. But I just fear right now, until Danny Briere and Keith Jones make some moves, that's going to be more mediocrity for the Flyers. That's just my fear. That is my deep fear. So that's all it's going to be for today, people. So don't like the move. I just don't like. I don't hate the move. I just don't like it. I just think it's meh, personally. So thank you guys for tuning in as always. Don't forget to leave a like and drop a comment as well. You can also hit that subscribe button. Does me a very great deal of service. You can also use the code TTPSPORTS, $20 off your first purchase at SEATGEEK. Great deal. Don't pass it up. You can also leave a follow at TTPSPORTS on TikTok and Instagram for all that good stuff. So Thanks, guys, for tuning in, listening to my rant, and I'll see you next time.